Hi. Today, what I thought I would talk about is kind of like moving through storms in our life. And I think, it's something that whether the storm is something happening in our outside life, whether the storm is us going through a loss of a relationship or us going through some type of change that's causing a lot of a storm within our internal experience. I think it's a theme that's pretty relevant right now from what I've seen talking to friends and just people I'm connected to. And as someone who's 28, I would say I've gone through a fair amount of experiences that have felt like a storm to me. And although I'm young and I'm learning new things every day, I definitely do have experience kind of moving through chaotic change. And what I've learned about going through chaotic change is that the things that make us suffer the most as we go through when we go through change is when we try and change the storm that is moving through us, right? Especially if the storm is more of an internal experience. Like let's say we went through a loss and we're feeling of a relationship, a loss of a pet, and we're feeling a lot of grief on the inside. If we try and run from that, or if we try and say, stop the storm from happening, to stop the grief from happening, it's only going to make that grief more loud and more chaotic, right? You actually can't stop a hurricane, even if it's an internal or hurricane moving through your heart, right? If you try and stop it, you're just going to get whipped by the storm, kind of like you standing in front of a hurricane yelling halt, and the hurricane just picks you up and throws you. And we kind of see that happen in our life when we try and go, I'm going to numb, check out, or I'm going to try and maybe even I'm going to try and use medication that's prescribed to me to make this grief go away. But that grief is just going to stick around and wait for you to then be sober again to feel it even, and it will come back even more intense because you've now kind of like tried to dam it, and then the dam's going to burst the next time you're actually in a space where you can actually are in the right mindset to actually feel the grief you're going through. And um, it's something that I think is really important is, okay, if I'm going through some type of internal experience that feeling a lot of emotions coming up, feeling a lot of grief, feeling a lot of change, moving through my internal experience, me trying to stop that from happening is not going to work. Me trying to avoid that is not going to work. The only the way to move through it with the least amount of suffering and with where that experience is serving you rather than causing you harm is to face and feel it. And when you decide to face and feel this internal storm you might be moving through, you are actually it actually is almost like resting in the eye of the storm, and it might feel chaotic, but it won't feel as overwhelming because you're resting in, I can handle this. And when you're resting in, I can't handle this and I need something to try and make this go away, is when the storm feels the most unbearable, and when the wind will be whipping harder than if we just rested in it. And so learning that when we're going through an internal experience that's really intense, can I face and feel it, and can I orient towards, if it was around someone leaving our life, if it was around, maybe someone betraying us, can I orient towards what am I learning from this experience and what can I be grateful for from this loss, rather than constantly blaming this person for causing me unnecessary harm? Because when you're thinking about grief really is something that transforms you for the better when you're welcoming it and able to feel it. And when we're living in, I don't want to feel this, is when grief then becomes a curse. It's when grief becomes something that fuels our greatest self-harm, fuels us getting lost in addiction, fuels us overusing technology, overusing substances, or overusing something as a way of trying to numb and check out, and it just creates our body just creates us our experience of our body. We become a more numb and checked out version of ourselves rather than someone who allowed the pain of grief to rip open our heart even more and love and appreciate and be even more present in our body. And it's okay if we kind of oscillate between those two. It's not about doing it perfect. And sometimes you really need to get something wrong before you can do something right. Or sometimes you really need to get something less right before you can get something more right. And, when thinking about grief and thinking about loss, and this is something I've talked about before, but like a couple years ago, like my closest friend at the time, and probably the person that I loved the most in my life at the time, you know, ended up leaving my life without really an explanation, just kind of ghosted me, and I stopped hearing from them. And I was devastated by it. It was like one of the most brutal losses I've probably gone through. And what I realized about that is like I always had the fantasy of like, oh, if we just have a conversation, we'd go back to being friends, right? If they just stopped ghosting me and actually responded to one of my texts, they would see that whatever they were thinking for why we're no longer friends anymore was not true, and we could go back to being friends again. I would have the person that I really loved and cared about back in my life, and I wouldn't have to feel these like hurricanes of grief that feel like are ripping through my heart. And so I would reach out like once a month, and I did that probably for over a year and a half, and would like try and sometimes they live by, I know kind of like where they live, and I would go to a beach hoping that they live by, hoping I would run into them, thinking, oh, if we could just meet and have a conversation, right? Maybe they're not responding to my text, but if they just run into me and we can talk, this will all go back to us being friends again. And I won't have to feel this crushing grief that I'm feeling. But it wasn't really honoring the experience of grief. It was more so me trying to run from grief, and instead of going, maybe that person was taken from me because they actually because I was probably one feeling like I needed them, right? And it was actually a way of me kind of staying in a place of maybe that I'm not enough as I am, right? I really now I kind of orient towards relationships as like I'm whole as I am, or I try to as the best as I can. And the loss of that past friendship that I've been talking about, what it really made me more aware of is I need to be more detached when it comes to relationships, right? We can get lost in a perspective of, I love this person, they're going to be in my life forever. But that perspective actually keeps us from really loving and appreciating someone in the moment, right? If we think we're going to have forever with someone, we might not always be, we might hold back more than if we go, this could be my last day with this friend. And something I've been really, since the loss of that friendship, I've been trying to lean into a lot more is like, okay, like how much more can I appreciate and love this person and show them how meaningful the relationship is in my life today, right? And can I do that regularly rather than kind of doing that, but thinking, oh, I have all this time with this person, right? Because every relationship's going to leave your life. Every relationship has an expiration date. And when you can lean into this could be my last day with this person is when we actually have the most meaningful relationships. It's actually when we show people the most love and appreciation. And when you do that, when they leave, it's going to hurt less. And also you will feel a little less clingy by them leaving your life because you wouldn't have gone, oh, I have all these things I want to tell them about how much I appreciate or adore them, or I'm so grateful to have them in my life, right? And so it's why it's important to do that while they're in your life. And you know, we also can be clingy when we think we need someone or their relationship. We wouldn't be okay without them. And that keeps us clinging to people when maybe they need more space, or maybe when they're trying to take a break from our life, or to leave our life entirely. We grasp onto them, and it actually makes the loss a lot more painful, or prevents maybe a reconnection further down the road from really happening, because the person is going, I'm trying to take space, and they're grabbing onto me, and that makes me feel not safe with them, and so I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. And probably something I did a little bit with that friendship I lost. And also what I've recognized is, like, now it's like, okay, I try and treat, to the best of my ability, friendships, relationships in my life like a flower, right? And it's like kind of like meeting someone and they give you a flower and you go, oh, this is so great, right? This is a beautiful flower. I'm so grateful to receive this flower. But if you had met with someone and they brought you flowers or didn't bring you flowers, right, you kind of would be okay either way. And that's kind of how I like thinking about connecting with others. I kind of see it as like someone giving you a flower, right? Like if I connect with this person or I don't connect with this person, I'm going to be okay either way. And while it'll be uplifting and it'd be nice to look at this flower and feel connected to this flower, whether it's a guy or a girl, that would be beautiful, but it's not actually going to say anything about me, or it's not really something that I need. It's just a bonus to have. And when we can look at relationships as like, I'm enough as I am, and any relationship is bonus, it actually helps us relate to people in a little bit more of a healthy way. And when people need space, we're okay giving them space. And when people want to connect with us, we can meet them connecting with us too as well. But and I'm not going to say I do that perfectly. I definitely don't. But I have found a lot more peace in my life, just being a little bit more detached and taking things less personally when maybe someone isn't excited to get to know me as I'm excited to get to know them. Or maybe the connection we're having feels a little bit more one-sided, and so it's like, okay, great, maybe this isn't someone that I'm meant to spend as much time with as I thought. And if that's a no, maybe it's just redirecting me to someone who's more of a yes. And sorry, my nose is itchy. And with going through loss, like, I think one thing I've really learned, especially about going through that loss of the friendship I had a couple years ago, is like grief comes into our life for a reason, and it's meant to make us a better version of ourselves. And when we go through grief, we always learn things. Like from that relationship that I lost, I learned, probably should be a little bit more picky about who I give all my love, time, and attention to, right? Because clearly I was giving it to someone who wasn't really valuing it as much as I thought they were valuing it. And that's kind of on me, right? If we buy a house with a bunch of mold in it, or the wood's rotten, or it's falling apart, and we, before we purchased it, we thought it was the greatest house ever, and then when we spend more time with the house, we see, oh, this house really doesn't care about my well-being as much as I thought this house did. And when we're relating to that metaphor to people, right, we go, oh, I could have been more picky, I could have been more discerning, I could have made sure that I was investing my time in someone who actually cared, rather than someone who might be a little heartless and cold and didn't care as much as I thought they did. And two, what you learn about grief is here, like what I learned through grief is, one, be a little bit more detached, but two, which can be healthy when, because it prevents us from clinging to people or being avoidant of people, but actually just helps us face people. When we're detached, we're actually saying, okay, this person says nothing about my worth, value, or how I'm going to get through the rest of my life. They're just nice to experience while they're here, and they could leave tomorrow. And can I rest in that? Because that's actually what's going to make me appreciate them the most while they're here in my life. And the third was which is kind of connected to this of can I love and appreciate people more, and can I love people like it's the last day I have with them, rather than thinking I have all this time with them and then I kind of hold back how much the words I've always wished they knew I would love to share with them, right? And when we can do that, we move through grief a lot more effortlessly. And with this loss of this friendship, the only time I've actually ran into this person in public on that beach I would sometimes go to, hoping that I would run into them and have a conversation with them. Like I think about a year and a half after this person left my life, um, I was on the beach and I was hoping to run into them, and I'd gone to this beach many times and never had run into them. And I was standing in the water and I was like, like I keep on hoping that I don't have to feel this grief, but clearly there seems to be no way to really avoid the grief I'm in. And so I went, can I just love this grief? And I put my hand on my heart and I said, I love you. I love you, grief. I love you, grief. I love you, grief. And I did that maybe for 5 minutes or something like that. And then I walked to shore and I was talking to my friend who was also at the beach. And I, the person my friend who had left my life abruptly and ghosted me, literally 5 minutes later walked by. And I was like, hey. And they were like, hey, good to see you. And then they kept on walking. And what I realized from that experience is wow, the universe is functioning on a way more perfect level than I thought. And I also got the impression of, if this person is going to come back into your life, they're not actually going to come back into your life until actually you fully face the grief you're in, which, probably isn't going to be the true for every relationship we lose, that person still hasn't come back into my life and it's been over 3 years. And to be honest, still feel a little grief about it, I still feel hurt about it a little. And so I don't actually know if that's going to be true or not, but recognizing, okay, maybe I'm experiencing the loss of this relationship for a reason, and maybe it's a deeper reason than I can even imagine or think about, and maybe it's happening for a reason that's meant to make me a better version of myself. And so, can I stop running from my grief or blaming this other person for being heartless and never actually facing my grief? And can I just face it? And can I love myself through it? And can I even say I love you to the grief? Because the grief is here to help you, not hurt you. And it only hurts you when you try to run from it, avoid it, or blame another person as it's their fault why I'm feeling this, which only would create more suffering in your life. Right. And when we're thinking about relating to people, relating to loss as you caused this, right? Someone else caused this. We never own our part, and committing to someone who maybe was not the best person to commit to, and And so, can we let some of that go? It's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel blame. It's okay to feel like you're a victim. It's okay to feel devastated by how someone has left your life or treated you. That's normal. We just want to balance that out with, okay, I don't need to live there. I can feel that side of that experience. I can create art from that side of the experience, but can I also focus too on what is this teaching me? What can I be grateful for from this loss? How is this loss making me better? And when you can find balance is when you're going to have the easiest time moving through the suffering, easiest time moving through the tornadoes that might feel like they're ripping through your heart on certain days. And the other type of like kind of loss we go through is maybe we're going through loss. Maybe it is in a relationship, but maybe it's more hardship we're going through. Maybe we're having hardship around financial struggles. Maybe we're having hardship around getting a job. And again, we can kind of rest in the hopelessness of nothing is working. This isn't going to work. I feel like a victim. But hopelessness actually never inspires change, right? And we only feel hopeless when we're always focusing on what's wrong with our experience. And what we realize is the more I focus on what's right about my experience, the less hopeless I feel and the more hopeful I feel. The less I feel like everything is happening is wrong, and the more I feel like, wow, this is serving my greatest and highest good. And this is actually exactly what I needed to become a better version of myself. And for me, like the another tornado I kind of went through, or storm I went through somewhat recently, is like the like over the past year and a half, I had a really hard time getting a job. I was working at, I've talked about this before. I was working at Stretch Lab, tore my shoulder, and was kind of unemployed slash working part-time jobs for over a year and a half, and it was brutal. It was so hard to go through that, and I was having to ask my parents for money, and I hated asking my parents for money. But recognizing, I also recognize that me and my parents really can't live together, and our relationship is worse when we live together. And it's not always the best for my own mental well-being and health. And I really had no other option but just to keep on going, and to keep on working these shitty part-time jobs, to keep on asking my parents for money, keep on sending out job applications and hoping something would change. And in that experience, I was in that experience for a long time, thinking like I was sending out hundreds of job applications, was getting no interviews, and I was thinking this isn't never going to work, right? It's not working. I'm not getting interviews. Like I don't know how to actually create a solution here. and 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 so I would give up or I'd take breaks, but recognizing that when things aren't working, it's not a call to try less hard, which I definitely have had a tendency to do in the past, and probably still have that tendency a little. Um, but it's actually a call to try harder, and it's really okay if I'm trying to get a job, or if I'm having financial struggles, and the things I'm trying aren't working. There's three ways to solve a problem. There's, can I be more committed, which means, and which means, can I try harder? Can I be more consistent, which is means I'm more regularly putting an effort towards this? Or can I be more creative, which means I try different avenues? And for me, what finally ended up shifting my my getting a job problem, was I started emailing hiring managers and dropping off my resume to businesses. Like I would even go to like a corporate office and drop off my resume to a front desk person and be like, hey, I want to come in for an interview. Like, or like, and you just get good at like, okay, I have to be really committed into this because the effort I'm taking is not working. And if I continue to take that effort, I've tried it for long enough where I'm starting to see it's not going to work. and, and, that, and so recognizing when we're going through an external storm, if we're resting in a victimhood mentality of I'm never going to find a solution, when you're thinking like that, you actually are never going to find a solution, right? there, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you go, okay, if I just put in more effort, if I'm more creative, if I'm more consistent, if I'm more committed, I will find a solution, right? That is the mentality that gets you over the hurdles. That is the mentality that will lead to solutions no matter how long it takes to come into your life. And if things are taking a long time to come into your life, like a great question to ask ourselves are we just trying the same repetitive thing and taking the same nail and hammering it into the wood and getting the same outcome, and thinking the next time it's going to be different, because the next time might not be different and we might need to actually try something different, right? And I kind of also was thinking about this in regards to health. And I think when we're thinking about health, is health, like when you're thinking about health problems, right? There's people probably that rely all on Western medicine and none on anything else. And there's people that are probably a lot more aligned in focusing on Eastern medicine and not really relying on Western medicine at all. And I think we like life is all about balance, and it's finding a balanced approach. And if we're trying integrative doctors, if we're trying chiropractic, if we're trying more alternatives, Reiki or Q or quantum QHHT, quantum healing therapy with Dolores Cannon, and that stuff isn't working, maybe we actually need to try more Western medicine solutions. And if our Western medicine solutions aren't working, maybe we actually need to try some of this more alternative stuff like QAHT, HHT, Dolores Cannon hypnotherapy. Maybe we need to try doing a parasite cleanse, doing a mold detox, doing a heavy metal detox, and working with an integrative doctor to do that, right? Sometimes we're having health symptoms just because we have an abundance of lead in our body, or an abundance of intestinal worms in our body, or our whole nervous system is burdened by a certain amount of mold exposure we've had in the past, or we're drinking our tap water that is full of bacteria and maybe metals that aren't actually good for our body. And you're never gonna know unless you actually get creative, right? And who's to say the symptoms we're having, what the actual root cause of that symptom is? You know, I've even heard people, other healers talk about that cancer often comes from a level of anger or hatred, right? Whether that's anger or hatred towards others, or anger or hatred towards ourselves. And that's actually one of the things that could be fueling cancer in our life. And also recognizing if you're having a really hard time controlling your anger, usually that typically means we have some type of like liver stagnancy or inflammation with our liver. And if we got that organ more healthy, we might have an easier time controlling our anger. And everything is like a holistic balance. And so starting to become real curious, okay, why am I having the symptoms I'm having? What areas of my life could I change on my own? Maybe that's eating a more organic and diet with more fruits and vegetables. Maybe that's making sure I have a great filter for my water that I'm drinking that isn't just like one of those $100 ones I buy at Target, but is like actually a high-end water filter. Like I really like the Berkey water filters. Maybe it's maybe if we have injuries that aren't really healing, we need to explore like something like Reiki, or something like doing more sound healings, or exploring, okay, how could I support the natural relaxation of my body? Because the more my body's relaxed, the more my cells are actually going to be able to regenerate. You know, maybe it's even like limiting our exposure to like EMFs and our phone, and looking at screens a little bit less. Like I've heard people you can buy some type of, I don't have this, but you can buy some type of timer that stops your Wi-Fi box like at night, like when you're not needing it, so that way you're not receiving EMF exposure at night. or and so it's just becoming curious, okay, how could I bring greater balance into my life? What are the things I could naturally change, whether that's exercising, eating a cleaner diet, and what can I explore detoxing? Because every human on this planet pretty much is exposed to some level of toxins in their day-to-day, whether that's just breathing in polluted air if they live in a city, whether that's drinking unclean drinking water, or maybe that's some type of level of parasites because we really love eating sushi or eat a lot of meat or eat things that just naturally sometimes have parasites in them or aren't really good about cleaning our fruits and vegetables. And so if we can become a little bit more curious about creating holistic health and also looking at how can I become better through these challenges I'm experiencing, we actually start to find solutions. And nothing really is ever here to truly hold you back. Everything is here to help you. And sometimes our greatest help is going to feel like the greatest hardship and death for and struggle for our ego structure. And I think I said this in the last video, but it's actually the greatest gift for your soul. And going through the job, struggling with a job for over a year and a half, I'm a totally different person than I was a year and a half ago. And I live a way more balanced life, and I'm way more efficient with my day. And I am just, and I do things in more balance. Like for me, that was bringing my spiritual practice into balance. And I never would have got there, I don't think, if I didn't go through these job struggles. And I also am just really good now at buying what I need and not buying what I don't need, because I went through such a long period of not having money and not having a lot. And with the loss of that friendship, it did make me a lot less more detached, and also helped me really face some codependency of how I give my power away in relationships and go, this relationship defines me, I need this person, right? That pattern really got highlighted when when my friend left my life a couple years ago. And it also just made me go, wow, I need to love people like they could leave my life soon, like they could leave my life tomorrow. And I need to tell people the words that I always think but don't say to them. I need to start actually telling that to them. And it also helps me become, it was such rapid hardship and growth and struggle. It helped me really, go, okay, can I become more of my best friend? And the last like 3 or 4 years, like even before losing that friendship, were really hard. And so it's been kind of an ongoing process of the universe constantly giving me new things to struggle with, or new things that I'm going, oh my God, this is really pushing my max, or I don't want to face this. I'm a victim. I can't get through this, right? But it's almost like cocooning to then become the butterfly. And so it's okay if we contract. It's okay if we try and hide. It's okay if we say this isn't never going to get better, right? But recognizing just eventually we're going to get to a place where we're going to have to open back up again. And when we open back up and we try a little harder, is actually when sometimes we get the relief we were craving for. It just might not actually come from the person we hoped would come back into our life, or it just might not come from, oh, it just might not come from the way we were trying in the past to find a solution, might not actually be the way we find the solution. And so we might need to get a little bit more creative, and we might need to try a little bit harder. And if we're already going, I'm trying really hard, okay, what can I change? How could I try harder? How could I commit more? How could I be more creative in the ways that I'm trying? And when you're willing to do that, and when you're willing to be move slowly, mindfully, intentionally, and face your experience rather than run from it, avoid, check out, numb, is when life really stops being a curse. And life, you really go, wow, the universe is helping me grow so much right now. I didn't even want this growth. I felt like I was doing pretty good. And and I had it all figured out. And I was just shown how little I know. I was just shown how little I have it figured out. And that probably will be a continuous process. There's a teacher that I enjoy, and they were talking about going through spiritual awakening, and how it's kind of like we're a sock and we're constantly being turned inside out. Like a meat sock being turned inside out. And it's an ongoing process of feeling like all your insides are being like poured out in front of you. And it's something that kind of really resonates. And I'm, as we become more spiritual and we start to figure out life more, I'm not going to say it gets easier. You just got your back more as you go through hardship. And you might find solutions to some things easier, but the universe is still going to push you, test you, and the challenges just become different, more interesting, and you might just have more nuanced perspectives as you go through hardship and struggle, rather than your perspectives like heal any type of hardship or struggle in your life. And you know it might you might be able to avoid some struggle that's unnecessary, like toxic relationships, or like being in relationships with people that mistreat you, or I even think if I had been more committed, consistent, creative, and trying to get a job right at the beginning of that job hire, or had someone told me that, probably would have found a job a lot sooner. And so, like, okay, might solve some problems in our life a little bit quicker, but it's not actually going to help us go avoid the struggle or hardship or the tornado that is meant to help us heal and evolve us. And so, can we work to face the tornado? Can we work to face the storm rather than going, I'm not meant to be experiencing that? Because if you are living there, the experience is only going to get harder. So I hope that helps. Thank you for listening. And I hope it's also Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving. I really appreciate all your guys' like time, attention, and watching the videos. Any comment, any like really means the world to me. And I love you guys so much. Okay. Bye.